You were never supposed to hear this. In 1888, on the edge of the Arkansas frontier, a secret was buried under timber, blood, and the polite silence of an entire town. It begins with a wedding, but not the one you think. Imagine a candlelit church filled with whispers instead of hymns. The bride is 22, the groom is 45, and the man she should have been marrying, his son, lies dead in the cold earth, killed in what the newspapers called a tragic hunting accident. That's the story the town told itself. But the records hidden in the basement of the Sebastian County Courthouse tell another story. They tell of 3 failed murder attempts, of poison administered slowly enough to pass as illness, of witnesses who vanished or died as soon as they began to talk. They tell of a father who saw in his son not an heir, but an obstacle, and of a young woman whose ambition and intelligence made her both a prize and a weapon. What you're about to hear is not just a crime of passion. It's the anatomy of power, manipulation, and forbidden desire in a time when family honor was everything and the law could be bought like timber. If you stay with me through this, you will see how institutions conspire to protect the powerful, how reputations are built on silence, and how the same patterns repeat today in boardrooms, churches, and governments. The story of Nathaniel Decker and Rose Sullivan is not just a historical curiosity. It's a mirror, and once you've looked into it, you'll never see loyalty, marriage, or authority the same way again. Fort Smith, Arkansas in the late 1880s was a place of new money and old codes, a raw frontier town that had learned to dress itself in velvet and lace. Timber and river trade had turned Sebastian County into one of the richest pockets of the post-Civil War South. Men like Nathaniel Decker were its new nobility, barons of sawdust and steam, who built fortunes from the bones of ancient forests and the backs of immigrant labor. In public, he was a pillar, a church donor, a patron of civic projects, a man who shook the mayor's hand and sat on the bank's board. In private, he was a strategist, a manipulator, a man who measured people the way he measured logs, by their weight, their yield, their usefulness. His only son, William, was supposed to inherit everything: money, property, influence. But in Nathaniel's eyes, the boy lacked the essential quality, the will to seize and hold power. William read poetry, apologized for dust on carriage wheels, and dreamed of making furniture instead of empires. To Nathaniel, that gentleness was weakness, and weakness is rot. Enter Rose Sullivan, an Irish immigrant who had fought her way out of Boston's slums with needle, wit, and ambition. On paper, she was exactly what William had ordered through Catholic parish channels. A devout, practical young woman willing to travel west. But paper can't hold hunger. Rose wanted more than a respectable life. She wanted to matter, to be part of something that moved the world. When she stepped off the Memphis Belle that September morning, with her worn carpet bag and her letter of introduction, she thought she was boarding a staircase to stability. Instead, she was walking into a web spun by 2 men, one too weak to set her free, the other too strong to let her go. This is the ground you're standing on now. A prosperous county, a powerful father, a pliant son, and a young woman caught between them. The official record calls it a marriage. The buried record calls it a conspiracy. And as you'll see, the deeper you go, the more those words, father, son, bride, lose their innocence and become tools in a game much older than Arkansas. Picture the Decker dining room that first September night. Crystal light spilling over mahogany so dark it swallowed the glow. The smell of pine smoke in the drapes. A table set for 3 but feeling like an arena. William sits stiff and eager, reciting details about poetry and travel plans. Across from him, Rose keeps her hands folded in her lap, her eyes tracing the carved woodwork instead of the man who wrote her such careful letters. And at the head of the table, Nathaniel Decker enters like a verdict. Tall, steel-haired, the kind of presence that fills a room before he speaks. He takes Rose's hand in both of his and holds it a breath too long. "Miss Sullivan," he says, his voice a low command disguised as welcome. "William's letters hardly did justice to your beauty." It's inappropriate, but it lands. For years, Rose has been treated as labor or charity. Now a man of power looks at her as if she were an equal, perhaps even a partner. All through dinner, the contrast sharpens. William hedges his opinions. Nathaniel speaks in stories of conquest and strategy. Timberland taken, rail lines built, debts collected, rivals outmaneuvered. Rose feels her pulse quicken, not from romance but from recognition. She has been invisible her whole life. Here is a man who sees and uses, By dessert, Nathaniel is already testing boundaries, turning to her with a remark that cuts his son while flattering her. William has many fine qualities, he says, but business requires a certain ruthlessness that doesn't come naturally to him. Steel under silk. Rose lowers her eyes, but something inside her stirs. She came here to be a good wife. She is hearing the language of power. When William offers to show her the library after dinner, Nathaniel interrupts. Perhaps Miss Sullivan would enjoy seeing where our prosperity originates. I ride out to Camp 3 at dawn. It's framed as an invitation, but it's a command and an audition. Rose accepts without knowing why. Danger has been absent from her life too long. By morning, the trap will be set, and by the time she realizes she's no longer just a bride-to-be, but a student of manipulation, it will already be too late to climb back out. Dawn breaks cold and clean over the Ozark foothills, a pale mist rising from the Arkansas River like smoke from an invisible fire. Rose dresses in her plainest blue wool dress, the one she can ride in, not the finery she'd imagined wearing as a fiancé. When she steps out behind the Decker mansion, she expects to see William, but he isn't there. Nathaniel is. 2 horses wait, 1 gentle mare for her, 1 black stallion for him. My son sends his regrets, he says, lifting her into the saddle with a hand that lingers just long enough to feel like a claim. Business, I'm afraid. It waits for no one. There's a glint in his eye that makes the excuse sound like a move, not an accident. They ride for 2 hours through rutted logging roads, the smell of sap and wet earth clinging to their clothes. Nathaniel speaks in a low, steady voice that draws pictures in her head. How he arrived here penniless, how he turned a failing mill into an empire, how every acre of timber was wrestled from someone else's hands. He doesn't just tell stories, he frames them like lessons. Every tree you see, he says, gesturing to a stand of ancient oak, is capital. It's either growing for you or for someone who had the nerve to take it first. Rose listens, thinking of Boston's crowded streets, of years spent sewing dresses she could never afford to wear. She came west for stability. What she's hearing now is something closer to conquest. Camp 3 appears out of the fog like a fort. Rough bunkhouses, mountains of cut logs, a steam donkey hissing and clanking at the center like a mechanical heart. Nathaniel moves among his men like a commander. Every question an order, every order a test. He shows Rose the machinery, the cables, the slopes, explaining how to move thousands of pounds of timber without losing a man. Then, almost casually, he places her hands on the controls. His palms cover hers as she pulls the throttle, dragging a log the size of a house across the mud. You have good instincts, he murmurs. Most women would be too frightened. I'm not most women, she answers before she can stop herself. His smile says he's been waiting to hear exactly that. The ride back from Camp 3 begins in silence. The smell of pine needles clings to their clothes. Rose's gloves are still stained with the black grease of the steam donkey. They follow a narrow trail through the hills until Nathaniel reins his stallion to a halt beside a creek where the water runs clear over smooth stones. He dismounts without a word, kneels, and skips a flat rock across the current as if testing its depth. Rose sits rigid in the saddle, suddenly aware of how far they are from town, how far from William, how no one knows exactly where she is. Tell me, Nathaniel says at last, his voice low, what you expect from marriage. It's such a simple question, but in the stillness it feels like a blade. She recites the answer she's always given. To be a good wife, support her husband's work, raise children. Nathaniel looks up at her, eyes narrowing. Those are duties. What do you hope to gain? No one has ever asked her that. Not the parish priest, not her mother, not William. She thinks of Boston's tenements, of sewing for rich women who never learned her name. I suppose I hope to matter, she says, to be part of something important. Nathaniel rises and steps closer, the sun glinting off the water behind him. Do you believe marriage to my son will give you that? Her cheeks burn. She should remount and ride away. Instead, she hears herself whisper, no, William is kind, but he's content to manage other people's decisions. He'll never build anything himself. Nathaniel's face softens almost imperceptibly. And building something matters to you? Yes. He reaches for her hand to help her down from the saddle. The touch lasts a second too long. The current of it runs straight to her chest. Then you understand my dilemma, he murmurs. I've built something that will die with me, because my son lacks the will to continue it. Rose knows she should pull back, but she doesn't. The air between them is heavy with unspoken invitation. He doesn't say the words yet. He doesn't have to. The creek runs on, indifferent, as a line is crossed that neither of them will ever uncross. By the time the two horses clatter back up the drive of the Decker mansion, the sun is already dropping behind the ridges, setting the windows aflame with orange light. William is waiting on the porch, hat in hand, looking like a man who's been pacing for hours. "How was your ride?" he asks, his relief obvious. Rose forces a smile. "Educational," she says, and feels Nathaniel's faint answering smile like a private signal. Nothing else is said. William chatters about supper. Nathaniel excuses himself to his study. But the atmosphere of the house has changed. It feels charged, like a thunderstorm holding its breath. That night in her guest room, Rose lies awake listening to the old house settle, the distant creak of the lumber wagons rolling down Garrison Avenue, and the echo of Nathaniel's voice at the creek. What do you hope to gain? The question won't stop circling in her head. She stares at the ceiling and realizes she is standing at a crossroads. She can marry William, accept comfort and respectability, and a lifetime of wondering what if. Or she can step into the current Nathaniel has shown her, a current of danger, desire, and power. She doesn't yet know where it leads, only that once you enter it, you don't come back the same. In the days that follow, she begins to orbit closer to Nathaniel without even meaning to. He sends for her when William is at the mill. Urgent papers, quick errands, questions about linen for the new bunkhouses that somehow require her signature. He takes her to inspect river landings, to meet machinery dealers from Chicago, to walk new timber tracts. Each trip looks innocent to outsiders, but each is a lesson in power disguised as business. He talks to her about profit margins, labor disputes, and the art of moving men the way you move logs, by knowing where the weak points are. He praises her intelligence, her questions, her instincts, and under all of it, unspoken but growing, is the pull she felt at the creek. William, meanwhile, grows more deferential, more distracted. He begins asking his father's opinion about wedding details, deferring to his judgment on trivial matters, apologizing for inconveniences that aren't his fault. Where Nathaniel commands, William requests. Where Nathaniel acts, William hesitates. And Rose, who once found William's gentleness charming, now feels only a hollow impatience. The shape of her future is changing, and she is beginning to like the feel of it. The first hard frost hits in late October, glazing the town's wooden sidewalks in silver and turning the Decker Estate's gardens brittle overnight. Nathaniel uses the cold as an excuse to keep Rose close, inviting her into the library on mornings when William has gone to settle accounts. The library smells of pipe smoke and leather. Ledgers and maps cover the desk like battle plans. This time, instead of showing her a timber contract, Nathaniel slides a sheet of paper across to her. On it, he's drawn two columns, strong and weak. Business, he says, isn't about numbers. It's about people. These are the two kinds you'll meet. The strong take what they need and defend it. The weak ask permission. He taps the left column. If you want to matter, you have to stand here. Rose traces the columns with her fingertip, feeling a flicker of recognition. And the weak? She asks. They become property, he answers quietly. They live by other people's decisions until someone stronger removes them. He leans back, eyes fixed on her. You've been on the weak side all your life. You know what that feels like, she swallows. Yes, then don't go back. The words hang between them like a vow. Nathaniel begins telling her stories from his rise, how he undercut rivals, how he planted rumors, how he bought the judge who granted him a disputed tract. He frames each tale not as confession, but as curriculum, a series of principles. Anticipate weakness, strike before the other man knows he's in a fight. Never let loyalty outrun self-interest. Rose listens, torn between moral recoil and the thrill of hearing power explained so plainly. By the third meeting, she's no longer just listening. She's offering observations on which foremen seem restless, which merchants are overextended, which parish women will repeat gossip. Nathaniel nods, pleased. You see patterns quickly, he tells her. That's rare. He doesn't touch her. He doesn't need to. The intimacy is in the teaching. Each time she leaves the library, she feels the old version of herself dissolving a little more, replaced by something sharper, harder. Outside, William thanks her for helping with errands, unaware that his fiancée and his father have begun building an empire of their own language, a private code of power that doesn't include him. By November, the Decker estate feels less like a household and more like a headquarters. Rose notices it first in small ways. Nathaniel no longer frames their conversations as lessons. He frames them as decisions. Instead of "what would you do?" he begins saying, "here is what we'll do." Instead of sharing stories of the past, he sketches diagrams of the future. The first time he uses "we," she feels a tremor of both fear and excitement. It begins with information. Nathaniel asks her to keep her ears open at the ladies' sewing circle, to note which merchants are extending William credit, which foremen complain about delayed wages. It's not gossip, he says, it's reconnaissance. Rose tells herself it's harmless. But when she begins feeding him details about which mill workers are drinking too much, which clerks are distracted by gambling debts, she realizes she's become a node in a quiet intelligence network. One evening, under the pretext of checking the accounts, Nathaniel shows her a ledger where numbers don't quite add up. "William has been too generous with advances," he murmurs. "Sooner or later, that kind of softness ruins a business." He draws a diagonal line across the page. "I'll handle the foreman. You, meanwhile, can make sure the parish ladies know which families have been less than grateful. They'll spread the word. Pressure will do the rest." Rose hesitates. This is no longer talk about strength and weakness. It's the first step in undermining William's position. But when she imagines William's apologetic smile, his endless deference, his inability to see what's happening around him, she feels more contempt than guilt. "All right," she says finally. From that point on, her errands take on a new edge. She attends church suppers and returns with whispers. She takes tea with foremen's wives and comes back with grievances. She sits at William's side in public, then slips into Nathaniel's study to relay what she's learned. In the flicker of the fireplace, Nathaniel thanks her not with words of affection, but with the same kind of praise he gives a foreman who hits his quota. "You're useful," he says one night, and instead of stinging, the words make her feel seen. Outside, the first snow falls over Fort Smith, soft and innocent. Inside the house, a marriage contract is still being planned, but the alliance forming behind closed doors is no longer between a son and a bride. December drapes Fort Smith in grey fog and wood smoke. The Decker mansion, once a haven of polished wood and warm light, now feels like a stage set with actors reading different scripts. William notices first in glances. Rose's eyes flicking toward his father during dinner, the way their conversations go quiet when he enters a room, the stack of correspondence that moves from Nathaniel's study to Rose's hands before it ever reaches his desk. At night, William starts staying later at the mill, telling himself he's catching up on paperwork. In truth, he's avoiding the atmosphere at home, the sense that something he cannot name is happening just outside his field of vision. When he does come home early, he finds Nathaniel and Rose in the library poring over maps of the new rail spur. "Just showing Rose how shipments are routed," Nathaniel explains smoothly. William smiles but feels a pulse of unease. Why should his father need his fiancée's help with freight logistics? The signs accumulate. A merchant thanks Rose for her advice about extending credit. A foreman mentions Miss Sullivan's visit to his wife. William begins to ask questions, small ones at first. How did she know about the timber tract sale? Why is she accompanying his father to the county seat? Rose answers each gently, always plausible, always wrapped in loyalty, but the questions keep returning like splinters under the skin. One evening, as snow begins to fall, William walks into the library unannounced and finds Nathaniel and Rose standing very close, speaking in low voices over an open ledger. They break apart too quickly. Nathaniel covers with a cough. Rose's cheeks are flushed. William stands in the doorway for a moment, then forces a smile. "I didn't realize we were holding a board meeting without me," he says. Nathaniel claps him on the shoulder. "Just teaching Rose about the business," he replies. "She's sharp as a tack." William laughs weakly, but inside something hardens. He begins to keep his own notes, to make his own quiet inquiries, to watch. For the first time in his life, he considers the possibility that his father might be plotting against him, and that the woman he planned to marry might already have chosen a side. By January, the polite frost between the three of them has turned brittle. William begins arriving at the mill before dawn and slipping home after dark. But instead of diffusing the tension, it sharpens it. His absence leaves Nathaniel and Rose free to meet, but it also gives him time to gather facts. He quietly asks the bookkeeper for duplicate ledgers, requests copies of contracts from the county clerk, and compares signatures. Little discrepancies emerge like tracks in fresh snow. Land options in his father's name instead of his. Banknotes signed without his knowledge. foremen shifting their loyalty to Mr. Decker Sr. instead of Mr. Decker Jr. At supper, he studies Rose the way a timberman studies a suspect log, tapping for hollows. He asks gentle questions about her errands, about the parish meetings, about why she accompanied his father to Little Rock. Each time she gives an answer, smooth as silk, but she can feel the shift. His gaze is no longer that of a trusting fiancé, but of a man measuring risk. One evening, he finally breaks the pattern. The three of them are seated at dinner when William sets down his fork and says quietly, "Father, when exactly did we decide to sell the North Tract to Mr. Callahan?" Nathaniel doesn't look up from carving his meat. "We haven't sold it. We're considering options." William leans forward. "Interesting, because I've seen the transfer papers. Signed, filed, without my name on them." For a heartbeat, the only sound is the clock ticking. Rose's stomach twists. Nathaniel's expression doesn't change, but his voice loses its warmth. "You've been reading documents that aren't yours." "They are mine," William snaps. "Or they should be. This is my inheritance, my future. Unless, of course, someone else is writing me out of it." Rose looks down at her plate. The room feels like it's tilting. She expected suspicion. She didn't expect him to speak it aloud. Nathaniel sets the knife aside and folds his hands. "Careful, son. You're starting to sound like a man who doesn't trust his own family." William meets his father's eyes. "Maybe I don't." The words hang between them like a crack of thunder. For the first time since she arrived, Rose sees something flicker in Nathaniel's face. Not anger, but calculation. A new phase of the game has begun. After that dinner, nothing in the Decker mansion feels neutral. The polite rituals continue. Breakfast trays, Sunday mass, polite greetings to visitors. But underneath is a steady hum of hostility. Nathaniel withdraws into his study, summoning Rose with short notes slipped under her door. William stops asking questions at table and begins keeping his distance, but she can feel him watching her, taking inventory of every word, every errand, every unexplained absence. Nathaniel moves first. He instructs Rose to have certain casual conversations at parish gatherings, which families support William's proposed expansion, which merchants are willing to extend him credit, which foremen grumble about his softness. Her answers go into a new ledger with columns headed loyal and movable. When she hesitates, Nathaniel reminds her of the life she said she wanted. "This is how it's built," he tells her, "not by waiting for permission, by moving before the other man knows the ground has shifted." But now there's a tremor of doubt under the thrill. William, too, is moving. He begins visiting the county sheriff, the parish priest, and a lawyer from Little Rock. Rumors of a will being rewritten drift back to the mansion. Rose hears them in whispers over tea, in confessions in the confessional, and realizes William is not as weak as his father thinks. He may be building a case of his own. One rainy afternoon, she finds herself alone in the library with two sealed envelopes. One contains a deed Nathaniel wants her to deliver quietly to a judge. The other, a letter William has left on her dressing table, asking her to meet him at the mill after dark. "I need to know the truth," he writes. For the first time since arriving in Arkansas, she feels truly cornered. The roles she's been playing, dutiful fiancé, eager student, covert partner, are collapsing into a single question she can no longer avoid. Whose future will she stand in? That night, she looks at herself in the mirror and barely recognizes the woman staring back. The Boston seamstress is gone. In her place is someone sharper, harder, capable of breaking a man's fortune with a word. But to do it, she has to decide which man. The night is black and wet, rain dripping from the eaves of the mill like beads of mercury. The saws have gone silent. The great belts hang slack, smelling of oil and damp wood. Rose pulls her cloak tight and slips through the side door, heart hammering. William is waiting near the main floor, a lantern in one hand, its weak light casting his face in shifting gold and shadow. He looks older than she's ever seen him, jaw clenched, eyes dark. "Thank you for coming," he says, voice low. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," she answers. He sets the lantern on a workbench. "I need to know what's going on. Not rumors, not polite evasions. The truth. My father is moving property out of my name. Foremen who used to answer to me won't return my calls. And somehow you're in the middle of all of it. Why, Rose, what did I do?" She swallows hard. "You didn't do anything. That's the problem." The words are out before she can stop them. "You let things happen. You defer. You apologize for power instead of using it. You asked me to build a life with you, but you never built anything yourself. William flinches as if struck. So, you've chosen him. I haven't chosen anyone, she whispers. Not yet. He steps closer, rain dripping from his coat. Then choose now. If you want to walk away from him, I'll send you east tonight. No scandal, no questions. But if you stay, understand what that means. He's not teaching you to be strong, Rose. He's using you to destroy me. For a heartbeat, all she hears is the hiss of rain on the tin roof. She wants to reach for him, to tell him he's wrong. But she also knows Nathaniel's voice in her head. Don't go back. She realizes with a jolt that whichever man she turns toward will define her forever. I need time, she says finally. William's eyes harden. You don't have time, he says. He's rewriting his will tomorrow. The lantern flickers. Somewhere in the dark, a drop of water strikes an iron plate, echoing like a clock. Rose feels it in her bones. Time is running out. The sky over Fort Smith that morning is a dull, bruised grey, the kind of colour that makes everything seem heavier, slower, inevitable. Inside the mahogany-panelled office above the main sawmill, Nathaniel Decker sits at his desk with two lawyers from Little Rock, ledgers and deeds spread out before him. He signs with a deliberate flourish, page after page, transferring timber parcels, stock shares, even the house on Garrison Avenue, into a new trust controlled entirely by his name. William's name appears only as a beneficiary at discretion. The lawyers say nothing. They are paid to witness, not to question. Rose stands near the window, gloved hands clasped, watching wagons creak past on the street below. Her dress is sober, almost funereal. She has told herself she came to observe, to understand. But she knows Nathaniel wanted her here, so she could see what decisive power looks like. When the last document is signed, he looks up at her with a small, triumphant smile. It's done, he says softly. No one can take from me what I've built. A door slams somewhere in the building. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. William bursts into the office, hair damp, eyes wild. I warned you, he says, voice breaking. I warned you to stop. He points at the stack of documents. You think I don't know what you're doing? You think the men in this town won't talk? Nathaniel rises slowly, like a man uncoiling. Sit down, William. No, not this time. I'm not a boy anymore. Rose's heart pounds. She has imagined this confrontation, but not like this. William trembling, Nathaniel calm as a blade. Everything you have, William says. You built on other people's backs. And now you're taking even my future. If you don't reverse those transfers, I'll go to the sheriff. I'll tell him everything about the accident. About... He stops himself, glancing at Rose. Nathaniel steps around the desk, his shadow swallowing William's. Careful, son. Words have weight. William looks at Rose, pleading. Tell him, Rose. Tell him you won't be part of this. For the first time, she cannot meet his eyes. Outside, thunder rolls over the valley. Inside, the air is charged, waiting for someone to move first. She realizes that in this room, at this moment, every choice has narrowed to a single point. Whatever she says next will either save William or end him. The thunder outside grows louder, a rolling drumbeat that vibrates through the window panes. William takes a step back from his father but doesn't leave. His fists are clenched so tightly the knuckles show white. You're not going to get away with this, he says. I'll go to Judge McAllister. I'll take the ledgers. I'll show him the poison bottles you keep hidden in the lumber office. Stop, Nathaniel says quietly. I'm done stopping. Nathaniel's hand twitches at his side. His voice stays low, but now it carries a tone Rose has only heard once before, when he was dressing down a foreman who let a tree crush a worker. You think these men will believe you? He asks. You think they'll side with a weakling over the man who feeds their families? William glances at Rose again, desperation flickering in his eyes. Rose, please, this is your last chance. Walk out of here with me. We can be on a train to Memphis by nightfall. We can tell the papers what he's done. Don't let him own you. She opens her mouth, but no sound comes. Every lesson Nathaniel has fed her, every whisper about strength and legacy roars in her skull. For a heartbeat, she sees William as he really is, gentle, decent, unarmored, and she knows if she goes with him, she will always be shielding him, always apologizing for power he refuses to claim. Nathaniel moves before she decides. In one smooth motion, he slides the heavy oak paperweight from his desk into his palm, not as a weapon, but as a statement. He sets it down on the edge of the desk between himself and his son. This is the last time I will offer you a choice, he says. Either sign the confirmation papers and accept your stipend, or walk out and be cut off forever. No more debates, no more delays. Rain lashes the window. William's breath comes fast. He looks at the paperweight, at the papers, at his father. "You're a monster," he whispers. Nathaniel's lips curve, almost a smile. "No, I'm a builder. Monsters don't leave legacies." "Builders do." William's eyes dart to the door. He's going to run, and Rose, trembling, realizes that in the next few seconds, she will either stop him, speak for him, or watch the trap close for good. 2 days later, the valley wakes under a brittle blue sky. The storm has blown itself out, leaving the air sharp and cold. Down at Camp 3, the men are setting up for a celebratory hunt Nathaniel has announced, a chance to reward the best crews for record timber output. The cookfires crackle, dogs bark from their leashes, rifles lean against wagons like rows of iron teeth. William arrives late, summoned by a note in his father's hand. "Meet me at the North Ridge at noon. We'll settle this like men." He comes alone, his coat buttoned to the throat, his father's old shotgun slung across his back. He doesn't see the quiet movements that have already shifted the day's routines. The foreman ordered to take the crews deeper into the cut, the wagon of provisions blocking the usual return trail, the bottle of brandy Rose herself placed in William's saddlebag, for warmth. Rose is already on the ridge when he arrives, the sun glinting off her hair under a simple felt hat. She's wearing riding clothes instead of a dress. "What are you doing here?" William asks, startled. His face is pale, hollow from sleeplessness. "This is between me and him." "I wanted to make sure you were safe," she says. It isn't a lie, but it isn't the whole truth either. Nathaniel has instructed her to be there, to keep him calm, to lead him toward the blind where the hunt will begin. Her stomach twists. She can hear Nathaniel's voice in her head as clearly as if he were standing beside her. Strength isn't wishing. Strength is doing, a crow calls somewhere down in the trees. William shoulders his gun and starts up the path. If he thinks I'm going to be intimidated by another speech about legacy, he's wrong. After today, I'm leaving for Little Rock. I'll go to the papers. William, she interrupts softly. He stops. She reaches out, lays a gloved hand on his arm. Be careful what you say up here. Words can echo a long way. For a moment, he looks at her, confused, almost childlike. Then he nods and starts walking again. Behind them, unseen through the pines, Nathaniel Decker watches his son climb toward the blind, the rifle already in his hands, his plan already unfolding. The ridge narrows into a high, rocky outcrop, overlooking the Arkansas River. Below, the autumn trees blaze red and gold. Above, the skies are hard metallic blue. Wind carries the smell of pine resin and distant smoke from the camp. It is almost beautiful enough to hide what is about to happen. William kneels to adjust his bootlace, unaware of the figure moving through the trees behind him. Nathaniel's dark coat blends into the shadows, his boots soundless on the damp needles. He carries his rifle as if it is an extension of his arm. His breath is calm. He has planned every inch of this ground. The slope of the ridge, the angle of the shot, even the story the foreman will tell later about a startled deer. Rose stands 10 paces away, fingers trembling inside her gloves. She has told herself she is only a witness, that she has not crossed the line. But now she feels the line dissolving under her feet. In the back of her mind, a whisper repeats. Strength is doing. Father, William calls, straightening. He thinks he hears movement. Where are you? Nathaniel steps out of the trees, rifle raised but not yet aimed. I'm here, he says evenly. You've been drinking. His eyes flick to the bottle sticking out of William's saddlebag. The bottle Rose had placed there. I needed courage, William says, voice shaking. I'm leaving today. I'm telling everything. Nathaniel's mouth curves in a small, sad smile. No, you're not. The rifle cracks. Birds explode out of the trees, 100 wings beating against the sky. William staggers, clutching his chest, disbelief frozen on his face. His gun falls into the leaves with a soft thud. For a heartbeat, he sways on the edge of the outcrop. Then the world tilts and he goes over, tumbling down the rocky slope into the gorge below. The sound of his body striking the stones is swallowed by the wind. Silence. Only the crow's cry, distant and harsh. Nathaniel lowers the rifle. He doesn't look at Rose. It's done, he says, as if closing a ledger. Now we move forward. Rose realizes her knees are shaking. Somewhere inside her, By dusk, the ridge looks untouched again. The rifle shot has already become a rumor drifting down through the camps. A buck spooked the boy. He slipped on the shale. The foreman Nathaniel trusts most arrives with 2 men and a canvas stretcher. They descend into the gorge without a word. When they return, they carry a shapeless bundle wrapped tight, a boot protruding from one end. No one meets Rose's eyes. Nathaniel issues orders with the precision of a man balancing an account. The sheriff is summoned and told it was an accident on a private hunt. The lawyers in Little Rock are telegraphed to finalize the trust, with no mention of William's signature. By morning, a statement will appear in the Gazette. Tragic misadventure claims life of heir apparent. Rose sits at the long oak dining table back at the house, staring at her untouched supper. Her gloves are still on. She hasn't washed the dirt from under her nails. In her head, she hears the shot again, sees the way William's face shifted from fear to astonishment to nothing. She wonders if, in that last instant, he understood. Nathaniel enters, removes his coat, pours himself a drink. He doesn't sit right away. "This is the hardest part," he says quietly. "The waiting, the silence. If you can bear this, you can bear anything." "I didn't shoot him," she says, her voice flat. "No," Nathaniel replies. "But you're here, and you didn't stop it. That matters more." He sets the glass in front of her. "You've crossed the river, Rose. There's no going back to the girl on the train." Outside, a carriage arrives, wheels crunching on gravel. The first mourners, the first opportunity to shape the story. Nathaniel glances toward the window, then back at her. "They'll expect you to be composed," he says. "To stand beside me. Can you?" She lifts the glass but doesn't drink. Her hands are steady now. "Yes," she says. It is the first time she's given him an answer without hesitation. Somewhere deep inside, a new voice speaks, cold and clear. "If you're going to live with wolves, learn to buy." 3 days later, the Decker mansion is draped in black crepe and the yard is full of carriages. Townsfolk cluster in knots under umbrellas, whispering about the accident and sneaking glances at the house. Inside, every mirror has been shrouded. The scent of lilies and damp wool hangs in the air. Rose stands at the top of the staircase in a plain black dress and a short veil. The girl who arrived on the Memphis Belle would have hidden in an upstairs room. This Rose descends slowly, one hand on the banister, pausing just enough for everyone to see her and believe the image she is presenting. The widow-to-be, the dutiful companion, the grieving almost daughter-in-law. Every step is a calculated beat in the story Nathaniel is weaving. At the foot of the stairs, Nathaniel takes her arm. His own face is a mask of restrained sorrow. "They're ready," he murmurs. Together they move into the parlour where William's casket rests beneath a spray of pine branches. The preacher clears his throat, the mourners hush. Outside, rain begins again, soft and steady against the windows. As the eulogy begins, Rose looks out over the crowd. Foremen, merchants, a senator from Little Rock, all of them watching her, taking her measure. Some see a grieving fiancé. Some see an ambitious survivor. None see the tremor inside her ribs, the memory of a rifle's crack. When it is her turn to speak, she rises and steps to the lectern. The words she prepared last night with Nathaniel's help lie folded in her palm, but she doesn't look at them. Instead, she lets her voice go low and steady, telling a story of William as a kind man, a man of promise, a man whose life was cut short by a cruel twist of fate. She keeps her hands still. She does not cry. When she finishes, even the senator looks away first. Back at the casket, Nathaniel squeezes her arm once. "You've done well," he murmurs. She meets his eyes without flinching. In the reflection of the window, she sees herself standing beside him like a partner, not a pupil. The thought frightens her and thrills her at once. Outside, the rain turns harder, blurring the view of the carriages lining up on the street. Inside, Rose feels the last piece of her old life wash away. By the following week, the house has been stripped of black crepe and the town has moved on to other gossip. Timber still leaves the Milliard each dawn, and the new trust's ledgers arrive from Little Rock bearing only Nathaniel's name. Outwardly, everything looks as it should. Inwardly, something has shifted. Rose begins moving through the house with a different gait. She rises early, reads the newspapers before Nathaniel does, and marks items with a pencil for his attention. She learns which foremen handle which contracts, which deputies are in Nathaniel's pocket, which bank is holding the trust's cash. At dinners, she no longer sits silent at the far end of the table but beside him, prompting him with details, smoothing over his rougher edges with a word or a look. People in town start referring to her as Miss Decker without thinking. Nathaniel notices. One night after supper he says, "You're learning quickly. I have to, she answers. If I'm going to help you build something that lasts. He smiles, but there's a flicker of calculation behind his eyes. You're not afraid anymore. I'm still afraid, she says softly. I've just stopped letting it decide for me. Later, alone in her room, she opens the small notebook she's begun keeping in the back of her wardrobe. Inside are neat, coded entries. Names, dates, debts, hints of who might turn if given the right push. It isn't a ledger Nathaniel knows about. It's hers. She closes the book and hides it again, heart steady. In the hall below, she can hear Nathaniel's voice on the telephone, laughing at some joke with a legislator in Little Rock. For the first time, she feels not just complicit, but equal. And perhaps, someday, dangerous. She goes to the mirror. The woman looking back at her is composed, almost regal. The girl who stepped off the train is gone, but her memory remains, whispering, "If you're going to live with wolves, learn to bite. If you're going to outlive them, learn to plan." Rose smooths her dress, then turns away from the glass. The house is still Nathaniel's for now, but already, quietly, she is beginning to make it hers. A month later, the winter winds sweep down from the Ozarks, and the mill runs on shortened hours. Nathaniel has gone to Little Rock for a round of private meetings, leaving Rose in Fort Smith for the first time with full authority over the house and the office. She moves through the day quietly but decisively, signing papers, giving orders, making notes. It feels like wearing a coat that's still too large but already warming to her shape. That evening she summons Ezra Finch, the wiry foreman who helped carry William's body up from the gorge to the small parlor. He arrives smelling of turpentine and horse sweat, hat in his hands. "Miss Decker," he says uneasily. "You sent for me?" "Yes." She pours 2 small glasses of bourbon, but pushes only one toward him. "You were there on the ridge. You know how easily accidents happen." He shifts from foot to foot. "I do. You also know which crews handle the shipments to Kansas City, which wagons take which roads, which drivers drink too much." Her voice stays soft, almost kind. "I need you to write me a list of everyone who owes my father favors, everyone who resents him, and everyone who might prefer to work for someone else." Ezra blinks. "Someone else?" She meets his eyes. "Me." For a long moment he says nothing. Then slowly he nods. "I'll see what I can do." When he leaves, Rose stays at the window, watching the lamps of the mill flicker against the dark. Her heart is calm. This is not one of Nathaniel's errands. This is hers. The coded notebook on her desk is filling with names. The web she's been sketching quietly for weeks is beginning to take shape. Somewhere in Little Rock, Nathaniel is likely toasting his own brilliance. He has no idea that back in Fort Smith, the girl he made strong has begun learning a different lesson: how to build power of her own, and how to aim it. She turns away from the glass, blows out the lamp, and smiles in the darkness. For the first time, the house feels like it belongs to her. https chatgpt.com C68C466C 5B8 8324 99C 65 5SC3C Text by percent 20 mid% to D January yet percent to T spoken percent twans allowed. https chatgpt.com C68 466C 5 Wuechi 8 and 3 core 9 C new C 6F5 ZD Text by percent 20 mid% to D January yet percent 20 spoken percent 20 allowed. The thaw comes early that year, loosening the frozen ruts of the mill yard and sending the river surging. Nathaniel returns from Little Rock in a new carriage with a new contract, a government supply deal that will double his shipments to Kansas City. He's in high spirits when he walks into the office, until he notices how smoothly everything has been running without him. "Ezra tells me the men are working like saints," he says, glancing at Rose as he loosens his gloves. "No shortages, no delays. Did you scare them into obedience?" "I offered them incentives," she says mildly, sliding a ledger across the desk. "It costs less than replacing crews." He scans the figures, frowning. "Interesting. And these envelopes, whose idea?" "Mine. You always said loyalty is cheaper than fear." He chuckles, but his eyes narrow. "I did say that." He sets the ledger down, steeples his fingers. "You're becoming quite the operator, Rose. Someone had to keep things from falling apart while you were gone." For a heartbeat, their gazes lock. Nathaniel is the first to look away. He pours himself a drink, but his hand trembles just enough for her to notice. Later in the hall, she hears him speaking to a deputy in a low voice she can't make out. When he catches her looking, he smiles too quickly. That night, alone in her room, she adds a new mark to the hidden notebook next to Nathaniel's name. Not a debt, not yet. Just a circle around his initials, a reminder that even the teacher can become a rival. She pauses, taps the pencil against the page. She is no longer thinking about escape. She is thinking about timing. Downstairs, the grandfather clock strikes midnight. The house feels different now. Not like his fortress, but like a chessboard. Each creak of the stair, each flicker of the gaslight feels like a piece moving. For the first time, Rose isn't afraid of being discovered. She's thinking about what she'll do when he finally does. She closes the notebook, slides it back into its hiding place, and blows out the lamp. In the darkness, she smiles faintly. The pine bough on her secret ledgers has begun to sprout branches. Nathaniel calls a family meeting one night in March. There's no family left but the two of them, and a few old retainers lingering like ghosts, but he still calls it that. The parlour fire is lit high, the windows drawn tight. He waits until the servants have left before speaking. "I've been looking at the numbers," he says. His tone is calm, but Rose can hear the edge under it. The crews are too obedient, the shipments too smooth. Someone is moving money around that isn't in the main books. Rose sits opposite him, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. "If you're accusing me, say so." "I'm not accusing." He sips his drink. "I'm reminding you that loyalty is a currency, and whoever pays it controls the men. If you're paying it, then you're controlling them. And if I am," she asks softly. He smiles without humor. "Then you'd better be sure you're still working for me." The silence stretches. The fire pops. Rose feels the weight of the little notebook hidden upstairs, the pine bough symbol she's planted in half the crews already. She could deny everything and go back to playing the pupil. She could confess and hope to be forgiven. Or she could begin the endgame. Instead, she tilts her head, as if considering a proposal. "What if," she says, "I'm building something for both of us? What if you're teaching me to be the partner you always wanted?" Nathaniel studies her, eyes unreadable. "Are you?" "I could be," she says. He leans forward. "Show me." It's a challenge, not an invitation. She understands it instantly. The next move she makes will decide whether she remains his creation or becomes his adversary. Later that night, lying awake, she sketches a new diagram in her notebook. 2 crowns side by side, one slightly higher, arrows running between them. Underneath, she writes a single word: soon. Downstairs, she hears Nathaniel moving through the house like a restless animal. The game has shifted. The teacher has noticed the pupil's teeth. The next morning, Rose doesn't wait for Nathaniel to summon her. She rides out to Camp 5 at dawn, alone. Her dark riding dress a deliberate echo of the one she wore on her first trip with him months ago. The men look up as she enters the yard. No one questions her. She has been appearing at camps for weeks, asking questions, approving repairs, checking ledgers. Now she moves as if she already owns the place. Inside the foreman's office, she lays out a new contract she has drawn up herself. Altered payment schedules, better food, shorter supply routes that cut Nathaniel's margins, but double loyalty among the crews. She does not sign his name, she signs her own. "From this day forward," she tells the men, "you answer to me. Mr. Decker still owns the timber, but I decide how it is cut and moved." There is a murmur, a shifting of boots. The foreman looks at her like a man weighing a bet, and then nods. "Yes, ma'am." One by one, the loggers follow, a small forest of heads bowing. It is done. She feels it settle like a key turning in a lock. By noon, word has reached Nathaniel. He rides out hard, hat pulled low, eyes bright with the old fury he used to unleash on rival barons. He dismounts in a swirl of dust, strides into the yard, and finds her standing on the platform, clipboard in hand, directing the loading of logs. For a moment he doesn't speak. He just looks at her, and she knows he's measuring the distance between what she was and what she has become. "What is this?" he asks finally, voice low. "Exactly what you taught me," she replies. "Control, vision, will. You built an empire. I'm making sure it survives. I never gave you permission. You never asked for mine," she says. There is a long silence. The men pretend to work, but every ear is turned toward them. Nathaniel takes a step closer, the air between them charged. Rose doesn't move. This is her line in the sand. Inside, she feels no fear now, only the electric calm of someone who has stepped out from under a shadow and found her own. Whatever happens next, she will not be small again. For 2 days after Camp 5, Nathaniel vanishes. No telegrams, no riders, no presence at the mill or the mansion. Rose continues moving through the camps, signing her name, issuing orders, making sure the new pay schedules are posted where every man can see them. The air around her feels like the heavy sky before a thunderstorm. Everyone senses it's coming. On the 3rd night he returns. She hears the stallion's hooves strike the cobblestones before she sees him. When he steps into the dining room, he's still wearing his riding coat, eyes burning with a light she has never seen. He tosses a bundle of papers onto the table. They're deeds, contracts, lien notices, the bones of the empire. "You've been busy," he says. "I told you," she replies evenly. "I'm securing what you built." He laughs once, low and dangerous. "You think a few signatures and promises make men yours? You think you can take what cost me a lifetime without paying the price?" "I've already paid it," she says. And so did William. That name stops him. For a heartbeat, his face flickers, the mask of command cracking. She presses on. "Every lesson you gave me, I learned. Every move you taught me, I practiced. I'm not your apprentice any longer. I'm your successor, or your rival. You decide." He moves so fast she barely sees it. One moment across the table, the next in front of her. His hand on the back of her chair. He isn't striking her, not yet, but the nearness is an act of war. "You think you're dangerous, Rose?" he whispers. "You have no idea what danger looks like." She meets his gaze without blinking. "Then show me." The room is silent except for the hiss of the gas lamps. Nathaniel straightens slowly, pulls his hand back, and for the first time takes a deliberate step away from her. He studies her like a rival baron across a negotiating table. "Very well," he says at last. "We'll see who survives the winter." He turns and walks out, the echo of his boots fading down the hall. Rose lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding. The war has begun in earnest. She closes the door, sits back down, and begins writing a list of names. The men she will need, the secrets she will use, the alliances she will forge. This is no longer about attraction. It's about survival and dominion. The change is immediate. By the next week, Nathaniel is back out on the timber roads, not with Rose at his side, but with his own hand-picked enforcers, old loyalists from Tennessee. Men who remember when the company was nothing but a muddy sawpit and a gun on the desk. He starts undoing her contracts, pulling crews off shifts she's scheduled, sending secret payments to foremen to keep them from drifting toward her orbit. When he speaks to her, it's only through intermediaries now, cold notes delivered by riders. Rose answers in kind. She moves quietly through the night between camps, speaking directly to the men she's trained, slipping them sealed envelopes with new orders. She sets up supply chains of her own, food and boots arriving in wagons marked with false company names. She starts hiring men Nathaniel has blacklisted, giving them work and loyalty. Her symbol, the small pine bough she started as a private mark in her notebook, begins appearing carved into bunkhouse walls, burned into tool handles. It's not just a camp anymore, it's a faction. The tension spreads like wildfire. At the mill in Fort Smith, 2 groups of workers nearly come to blows over whose orders to follow. Out in the hills, a logging sled accidentally breaks free and crushes a supervisor known to be Nathaniel's spy. People stop speaking openly. Conversations break off when strangers walk past. The Decker Empire feels like a fortress that's been split down the middle. At night in the mansion, Rose walks the empty halls and feels the weight of the gamble she's taken. This is no longer seduction or ambition. This is open rebellion. And the man she's opposing built his life on winning exactly these kinds of fights. In her room, she lays out a map of the camps, marking them in charcoal, his and hers. There are more black marks than white now, but she also knows he has money, guns, and no hesitation about using them. Down by the river, a fog rolls in from the Arkansas. Somewhere out there, Nathaniel is moving pieces she can't see. She feels it like a storm coming up the valley. The descent is nearly complete. The girl who stepped off the Memphis Belle with a carpet bag has become a general in a private war. The next move will decide everything.